that white paper is a genuine breakthrough in computer science. It's the first time that,
Who is Satoshi Nakamoto?
and no one's found a way to break it. The most likely explanation is it's probably Hal Finney, maybe in collaboration with one or two people like Nick Szabo.
What was in the white papers that you
Yeah.
read that got you all fired up about it?
Yeah. So the Bitcoin white paper is a pretty fascinating document. It's pretty complicated and it's kind of dense for anybody who's not read it. And I read it in, I think, December of 2010. I just happened to see it on this website called Hacker News, which like people just put out technical content. And it was describing how the world could have a currency that was decentralized. No country controlled it. No company controlled it. But it could be provably scarce, kind of like gold, where you couldn't just make more of it out of thin air. And you and I could have a peer-to-peer transaction with no intermediary in the middle, like a bank or a credit card company or someone taking fees or being able to deplatform or debank one of us, and so if you could have a peer-to-peer cash system that was trusted because there was no government or kind of company that could go in there and manipulate it, I was immediately captivated by that. Like I had been reading like a lot of like Ayn Rand and some of these economists like Milton Friedman, these kind of free market guys and libertarian stuff, and the idea like really appealed to me, having seen how Argentina, like these people's lives had been destroyed by high inflation. I was working at Airbnb at that time, seeing how they were trying to move money to 190 countries all over the world, and it was completely broken and slow and high fees and delays. And so I read that Bitcoin white paper and I was like, that's a crazy idea. That's kind of like the internet or something.
Mm-hmm.
How do we have a global decentralized network for sharing information? The internet kicked that whole thing off. This was describing something kind of like the internet, but for moving value and money and all types of assets, and kind of like an internet of money or something. And so I just kind of couldn't stop thinking about it for like 6 months. I kept reading more and more, trying to get my hands on any kind of information I could find. And then I started going to these early Bitcoin meetups that were happening in San Francisco, which was a crazy experience of its own. Because the people who would show up to these things in 2010 were like, some of them were like anarchists. Some of them were like computer science PhDs. Some of them were just like homeless people coming in for free beer and stuff like that. It was a real motley crew of early people. But I couldn't stop thinking about it for 6 months. And that's what made me start to work on this prototype, like nights and weekends, of what would eventually become Coinbase.
Interesting. I mean, who is Satoshi Nakamoto? Who is it?
Yeah. So nobody knows for sure. And I wouldn't claim to know for sure. But I think there's a couple good theories out there. One is that there's this guy, Hal Finney, who is a computer scientist. He passed away, so he's not alive anymore. I think there's a good argument he's probably one of the people that created it. Now, it could have been multiple people that collaborated and tried to use this pseudonym as kind of a, I think they knew that if this worked, that they might get hauled in front of Congress or, killed. Yeah. I mean, and that Satoshi Nakamoto or whoever that is, or they are, they did mine a lot of early Bitcoin, which is now worth a ton of money, like at least $100 billion or something. So they knew like their family would have to have private security. And so I think they were thinking that far ahead. I'm just speculating, but that could be the case. So anyway, Hal Finney is a good candidate. There's another guy, Nick Szabo, who may have been a collaborator. There might have been a third person. And a bunch of journalists and stuff have tried to track down these different people who may or may not have been Satoshi. I think most of them got it wrong. The most likely explanation is it's probably Hal Finney, maybe in collaboration with one or two people like Nick Szabo. But regardless of who Satoshi actually is, the idea stands on its own, right? It's kind of like, I don't know, like if someone had discovered the theory of relativity, but that person turned out to be a bad person or a good person, whatever your judgment of them, it doesn't really matter. Like the theory stands on its own. It's a genuine breakthrough. And I think that Bitcoin, that white paper, is a genuine breakthrough in computer science. It's the first time that someone was able to come up with a purely digital good that was provably scarce. Like I'll give you a simple example. Like, let's say you have a photo on your phone And you can make infinite copies of it. You can send it to me, you can send it to 100 people. Like most digital items are easy to be copied, and you can just have infinite copies of them. That's a bad property for something to be used as money. Money needs to be provably scarce. Otherwise, someone can just kind of create a ton of it out of thin air. And so this algorithm that they describe in the Bitcoin white paper says, all right, we're going to have a digital item, but we're going to guarantee the scarcity of it. And I mean, if you want, I can try to describe how that works. It gets a little complicated, but like the important thing to realize about it is that at this point, like thousands of people have looked at that algorithm and tried to break it, and no one's found a way to break it. Even like, if China or like these big nation state actors with the top resources, everything in the world, if they could find a way to break it, it's very profitable. They would be able to take $1 trillion or something out of Bitcoin. No one's been able to break it for like whatever it is, 13 years now. So it's the longer it goes on, the more proven it's become of how it's going to stand the test of time. And the mathematics behind it is really solid.
Can you talk? I mean, we're talking about printing money out of nothing.
Yeah.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
very familiar.
Federal Reserve. Yeah.
And actually, that's where I want to go. Is I want you to talk a little bit about the Federal Reserve when we came off the gold standard and what's happened.
Yeah. So I think this is a fascinating topic if you study history, right? And there's been, obviously America has the reserve currency today. It's a huge form of power for the United States. And if you look back at history, there have been various other empires, the British and the Dutch, and going back, China and various countries at different times have been the global superpower and had the reserve currency. And usually what happens is they start off with their currency being backed by a hard commodity, something that is provably scarce, like gold. And then eventually, usually during a time of crisis, these countries will, quote unquote, temporarily depeg it from that underlying commodity. And then after a number of decades or whatever, they'll lose discipline and start to overprint it. And then they lose the reserve currency status and some new one arises. So in the US, unfortunately, dollars are no longer backed by gold, right? That used to be the case. There was a piece of it got disconnected in I think the 1930s where they said, the gold's still there, you just can't actually come in and exchange $1 for gold. It used to be actually you could go in and if you gave them $1, they'd give you back, I forget, some fraction of an ounce of gold in exchange for it. In like the 1930s, they said, trust us, the gold is still there. You just can't come and exchange it, but it's still backed by gold. And then I think it was 1971, Nixon, during the Vietnam War, I think they were having budget deficits and whatnot. And he kind of said, as a temporary measure, you can go watch the video of this on YouTube. He literally says, this is a temporary emergency measure. It's not going to be, we're going to go back on the gold standard soon. Don't worry. We're going to fully depeg it from the gold. And that allowed them to run these budget deficits. And of course, we never went back.
No matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.